There we go. And let me spotlight. And then let me spotlight.
You go.
Birds coming in. I will wait. Yep. Well, good evening, everyone. Glad to see you. This is, I think, our fifth in a series of book talks and webinars that the Cromwell Cooper chapter of the Union of the Black Episcopalians has had. And we are creating a repository of webinars and book talks so people can see them at their leisure. But I'm glad to see those of you who are here with us in person. And this evening, we have the Reverend Dr. Robert Phillips, Canon for Leadership Development and Congregational Care in the diocese. And before we get started, what is that? Tell us what you do.
What does all that mean? Well, I'm responsible for a couple of things. One, the ordination process for those that are discerning a call to the priesthood or to the diaconate. I'm also responsible for transitions. I'm the transition officer for the diocese. So for those parishes that do not have a settled priest, a settled rector, I help them in exploring what that might look like and finding one. I also do a lot of conflict management work. I know that's surprising that that would be necessary in the church, but believe it or not, it is. And so I do a lot of that. So those are the three major hats that I wear.
Well, good, good. It seems like as we go through the book, first, what moved you to write a book, A Space for Grace, Pathways from Brokenness to Beauty? What made you write a book dealing with how to make space for grace? Again, this is the church. There should be plenty of grace, right? All over the place. Why did you believe there was a need for this book?
Space for grace is a phrase that I have used for many, 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 many years, not completely understanding the depth of it or the profundity of it as well. But I think it's so appropriate because I think that we all need a space for grace, a space where we can go and be, a space where we can go and feel safe, a space where we can go and feel encouraged and empowered, enlightened and equipped. And I felt that I wanted to give energy to that because I've lived that. As you know, in my book, those of you all that have read it, it's semi-autobiographical. I gave a lot of information in there about me that even some of my more intimate friends were not familiar with. But I thought there was a need. As far as the church is concerned, I think that there's a need for the church to provide a space for grace so that the people of God, the people of the church, can actually move towards healing and wholeness.
Well, you kind of, piqued my next question because it does seem that a lot of this would seem to be kind of a memoir. So I am reading it correctly. So how does your experience with race and gender identity fit into the making of the story in the book? Because, the church is going through its own growing pains with those issues.
Well, I think I'll come out of the gate by saying that you cannot heal what you cannot feel. And I think that when we speak about the church and the sins of racial injustice and the sins that gave rise to reparations and all of that, that the church has to come to grips and be honest with itself in that this is me, if you will. This is me. And so the me includes all of us, all of us. And so the invitation is, what are we going to do individually so that we might get on a trajectory towards healing so that we can ultimately become the people that God has created us to be? And that's what gave rise to me breaking the book down into the three sections of a psychology of grief, a theology of lament, and an ideology of relationships.
So a lot of times in church, we believe that we all know what we mean when we use terms, especially in the Episcopal Church, right? Because we got a whole lot of Episcopal speak. But for you, what is grief? How do you define grief in terms of this book and going from brokenness to beauty?
Well, grief is the profound sense of loss. I'll just use that as a very simple definition. And as far as the other major terms in the book, grace, brokenness, and beauty, I do break those down. And if you will allow me, I will lift up
Go
those
right
specific
ahead.
definitions for you. I define grace as the freedom to express and explore the passion in your life. I define passion as that for which you have boundless enthusiasm. And the key word is boundless because we live in a world of boundaries. So the definition of passion might morph into that for which you are willing to take a risk. Locating a space for grace that encourages taking such risks, free from harsh judgment based upon others' perceptions, and celebrating vulnerability such that authentic and honest sharing occurs is a rare find and a true gift.
Mhm.
I'll define brokenness as an inner pain that possesses the power to inform the way you navigate through life. Depending upon the intensity of your pain, you may even surrender on taking agency in navigating your life and allow the brokenness in your life to navigate you.
Mm.
The intensity of your pain may also be so great that you may find yourself projecting the effects of your pain upon others, fracturing relationships, and further deepen your pain and exacerbate your brokenness. And
Mhm.
finally, I define beauty as an outward manifestation of an inner desire to intentionally live your life to the fullest, recognizing that there will be times of brokenness along the way, but never allowing those times of brokenness to define who you are. I believe that our beauty is manifest in our ability to manage the impact and the effects of those times of brokenness in our lives.
Mhm. Thank you for that. Thank you. And listening to you, you call on us to take a journey on and through personal brokenness. And we always hear that we are all broken in some way. Do you believe that if we keep focusing on brokenness, and I'm kind of channeling the late Bishop John Shelby Spong, he said, you keep telling folks they're broken, then they'll live up to that expectation and don't think there's anything else possible for them. So if we keep focusing on brokenness, will we live into that expectation? And then since this is a journey that you're taking us on in the book, what lenses have you used? And I suppose you recommend for this journey?
Wow, that's a lot. So,
I told you it was an inquisition.
and I so appreciate the question. I really do. Let's talk about the lenses. The
Mhm.
lenses. One of the things that I do believe is that there's a divine mandate that God wants us to be in healthy relationship with God, others, and self. Healthy relationship with God, others, and self. So those are three of the lenses that I use to position us so that we can actually step into that space of grief, the psychology of grief, the theology of lament, and the ideology of relationships. I think that it all starts from there. Now, when it comes to brokenness and finally and moving to beauty, I reflect upon one of the verses from the 23rd Psalm. And that is, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. The operative word there is through. You're not supposed to take mail there in the valley of the shadow of death. All right. And so I think that we have to be intentional. We have to be intentional about always being curious about, why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? Where is this coming from? Where is it coming from? And that gets into the portion of my book with respect to the ideology of relationships, where I talk about our buttons. Our
Mm.
buttons. And one of the major phrases that I lift up, and then I'll give a comment here. Major phrases that many of you all have heard me use in the past is, while your partner may have pressed your button, your partner did not install your button. And so when we are going through conflicts, when we are having all of these challenges in our lives, I think that in looking at our brokenness, if we take the time to examine the installation experience of our button having been installed there, and we take that time, we can then find natural or organic ways to move into another space, because then we are taking or assuming total responsibility for our actions and not expending energy upon and projecting stuff onto the people that are around us. Not to say that they don't trigger us, because Lord knows people do. However, for us to take responsibility and to hold ourselves accountable for our behavior and the ways in which we are navigating through life, which should be from brokenness to a state of beauty, however you might define that.
And so you have defined what beauty is. Is beauty the same as healing, or is healing a component of this beauty that you talk about?
I think that healing is a process that enables you to realize your beauty. It's all evolving. It's all an evolving thing. You know, we're not done until we're done. Not done until we're done. So I think that as we journey, as we engage this journey of examining our brokenness, that we kind of naturally gravitate towards healing. We want to be healed, which is why it goes back to the whole definition of brokenness, and that you're trying to understand, what is your passion? What is your passion? In grace, rather. What is your passion? That for which you have boundless enthusiasm. And the operative word again is boundless, because we live in a world of boundaries. I think that when we experience brokenness, we have a natural tendency to want to heal. We want to do whatever we need to do in order to feel differently, in order to feel better. And that oftentimes requires us taking risks along the way.
So what is your beauty?
My beauty. Can we start with my brokenness? No.
Brokenness to pathways.
Pathways. You know, my beauty is in living into and embracing the skin I'm in. I wear a lot of different hats as far as who I am. You know, I'm a Black, gay male. All right. Priest, therapist, brother, godfather, teacher, Canon, all of that across the board. And so being comfortable in the skin I'm in, you know, for all of the growing edges that I have, I'm perfectly fine in talking about those and in working on those. And I think that that's a part of my beauty. For me, I don't only talk about that my buttons, but I also will discuss how I'm trying to manage those buttons. I call that managing little Bobby.
Managing little Bobby?
Managing little Bobby, who wants to stomp his feet and all of this, and well, just out of control. But I managing him so that he is able to respond to various situations in life, as opposed to reacting to different situations in life. Because that's the thing with respect to the whole button thing, is that, yes, somebody presses your button and you then go to that space where you examine the installation experience of your button, and then you know what that is. But that's just part A. Part B is taking responsibility to act upon that, and to decide, to make a conscious decision. I'm not going to react in the ways that I did in the past, because what that did was just further my brokenness. But rather, I'm going to respond in a different way that will enable me to get closer towards the beauty through the healing process that I truly want. And many times we don't do that. We don't put on our big boy, big girl pants in order to do that. We are very proud of the fact that I know where this comes from. I know what this is all about. Well, cool. Now, what are you doing about it? And how are you going to hold yourself accountable for it?
Thank you for that. And, if you have questions, anyone have questions, you can raise your hand or you can write them down, and at the end, ask them. But if it's something pressing, just raise your hand and we'll go straight to the questions, because there's, a nice little group of us where we can have a conversation. You talk about the psychology of grief. What is that? And does the Episcopal Church do a good job of helping members getting through that valley, right? And not purchasing real estate? And how does your process help people deal with grief? I mean, we're very good at funeralizing folks. We can do that. You know, we have bereavement committees, but how does the Episcopal Church, or does the Episcopal Church have a process to help people get through the grief, the various types of griefs that's in their lives?
I think that the church in general and that the Episcopal Church does have resources, that we do have resources to help people and to support people. And I think that it's done in many different ways, and it has been effective to a certain degree.
Mhm.
I think that more often than not, those resources or those ways of being are more grounded in our head, in understanding what is going on, as opposed to in our heart, in feeling what is going on. Not to say that we don't feel. I don't think that we have as many opportunities to express our feelings as we do to express what we are thinking about, how we are processing something in our head. And that's what gave rise to me really focusing upon the lament psalm, which you see in the book, and giving very clear instructions as to how you can develop your own personal lament psalm based upon whatever season of disorientation in which you find yourself. And so that enables you to connect your head and your heart. I never want people to think that I want them to leave their head. Don't think about this. No, 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 no. What I do invite people to do is to connect the head and the heart such that they can actually have an actual, genuinely honest conversation or soliloquy with God about how you feel. Many times when I lift up the lament psalms, when I teach the class, there have been times in some of the more conservative parishes and churches throughout Washington and some throughout the country where I've taught the class, that there is one senior parishioner at the back of the class, and upon my sharing these lament psalms from reading from the Bible, they've never heard these before. And of course, you wouldn't hear them before. They're not big hallelujah types of things that we include in our lectionary for obvious reasons. One senior asked me, "Reverend Phillips, are you reading from the Bible?" And I responded, "Yes, ma'am, I'm reading from the Bible." She said, "But is it the Holy Bible?" And she was coming from and she told me after class, she said, "I never heard of such. And I would never talk to God in the ways that you lifted up those lament psalms in the Bible. I would never, that's so disrespectful." And I respectfully invited her to think about that and say, well, do you want to be honest with God about how you feel? Because not being honest with God about how you feel is sharing how you feel about God's ability to do things in your life. Don't box God in. God can handle it. God can handle it. And God wants you to speak honestly to God. So that's the psychology of it all. And that gets into the spiritual piece as far as the lament.
And you talk about the laments, and a lot of folks don't know that 1/3 of the Psalms are lament Psalms, and you have personal laments where folks are going like, and then you have communal laments where the whole community is complaining in faith to God. And as you say, God can handle that. And it does allow us some freedom to, raise our fists, cuss, fuss, and go like, well, why, Lord? You're like, you promised and you have reneged on your promise, and I want an answer. I want an answer. So it's good that you have those in your book, and that you help people create their own lament psalms, because that helps people get through the grief, because now they see it on paper and they read it out loud. And they can internalize it. And then they can do whatever they want to do with that piece of paper. They can tack it up on the wall. They can ball it up and throw it away. They can burn it. But at least they have expressed that disappointment in some cases with God. Because a lot of times we pray, not for God, what God wants, but for what we want. And then we get upset when we don't get what we want. And this is an opportunity to kind of like have that conversation. Like, you told me if I ask for it, you will give it to me, and you did not give it to me. So what happened?
And that's exactly right. And one of the most powerful verses in the book of Psalms with respect to the lament is Psalm 22, verse 1. My God, why have you forsaken me? Implying that we have a relationship. My God, why have you forsaken me? And I have expectations of that relationship too. That came out of Jesus' mouth.
Right.
The other thing that I'd like to offer as you speak about the whole psalm piece, the development of the psalm piece, is that one of the things that I focus upon or invite people to do is to develop their own personal lament song, because when you do that, you're experiencing a type of personal or self pastoral care. Pastoral care. And many times what has happened is that as a result of a person creating or developing their own personal lament song, they've experienced pastoral care, but it has also triggered them to cross that bridge into pastoral counseling. Because it raises their awareness that there's something in my life that I have not fully dealt with. I'm not managing this very well, and I need to unpack this. So you go from pastoral care, now crossing the bridge into pastoral counseling. And that's where more of the healing occurs, and you move closer and closer towards beauty, once again, the way you define it.
Thank you for that. Dr. Bird, I see your hand.
Yes, I just want to circle back around to the grief statement. You mentioned that there are resources within the diocese. Can you be more specific? Is it at a diocesan level, local parish level, and what are those resources?
Yeah, well, you're looking at him right here. But, yeah, I get a lot of calls. I get a lot of calls from parishioners that are really seeking some heavy duty counseling as a result of the complicated grief that they are experiencing. And the truth of the matter is that the way that I engage them is by referring them to the Pastoral Care and Counseling Center of Washington, of Greater Washington. So as far as other resources that are concerned, I made that statement based upon my hope and my desire that truly is the case, that some of you all would bring up the fact that, well, yeah, we have a grief thing going on at our church, et cetera. I haven't seen a lot of it. I am asked a lot to facilitate grief sessions in the diocese. And so that's one of my joys.
You're only one person.
I know.
So, and as we know, grief is different for everyone.
Yes.
That whole grief cycle. And so when we think about, I thought it was an interesting question. What is it that we as the Episcopal Church offer to our constituents? And I would say on a scale of 0 to 10, 2. Because after the funeral, very little interaction goes on in helping people to heal or go through that grieving, healing process, unless they are seeking those services outside. And if I don't know you or know to seek out support, it doesn't happen.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that I witnessed when I was bereavement manager for a hospice here in Washington for a couple of years, and I wanted to take that to the funeral homes. For you all to be, y'all are working with families at their most vulnerable point in heavy duty grief. Do you offer any type of resources? And more often than not,
No.
I would direct it to a pamphlet, over on the side, something like that. And, we just don't provide for that, unfortunately. unfortunately.
Mhm.
And grief on so many different levels, not just the physical loss of a loved one, but grief with respect to losing your job,
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
grief
grief
with
comes in
respect to
all form, shapes and
all,
forms,
all shapes.
all shapes and
So
forms. Which
you're
brings me
absolutely
back to the title of your book, Pathways from Brokenness to Beauty. And Gail asked a question I was going to ask about difference between healing and beauty. Why not pathway from brokenness to healing to beauty?
well, and I think that, depending upon the way that you define it, that would be fine. I use healing, I refer to healing as a type of process as
Mhm.
opposed to a type of destination.
Destination. So
But
beauty is the destination.
the way that I'm defining it,
Okay.
yes.
Because I sign most of my uh, letters to friends and all to celebrate the beauty in you.
Mhm.
Mm,
So that's
mm,
my closing, not a sincere, have a good day, but
Mhm.
beauty for you. You and I guess I'm seeing it from the same position. Beauty is that destination.
yeah,
That is what,
yeah.
once you discover it, first got to discover that beauty in you.
Mhm.
But once you discover that beauty, I think then you see yourself grow exponentially. You begin to do things that you haven't done before.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
That goes back to one of the first questions that Gail asked me with respect to, why did you do this book?
Mhm.
I I reached a point in my life where, well, one, in being on this sabbatical, I had the time
Mhm.
and I had no distractions. So thanks be to God for that. But also, it hit me in my spirit to share my story with other people. And that's one of the things that has happened at many of the book signings that I've done, that people have come up to me with tears in their eyes saying, I thought I was the only one that went through this.
Mm.
I thought I was the only one that experienced this type of dynamic from my family, this type of dynamic from
Mhm.
my love interest. And I'm like, no, no, no.
Right.
And well, there's a setup because
Well,
there's
what I
a
liked
second
about,
book.
of course, I just got the book Sunday,
I know.
but but
And I'm grateful. Thank you.
okay, but what I've enjoyed so far is the quote unquote, and I think it's great, the simplicity in which you write.
Mhm.
It's not jargon, and so when people read it, they can read it and really, you know, connect with it. And so
Mhm.
Thank
that's what I appreciate about it.
you.
Mhm.
That it's a very quick read, simple, but very profound in thought. It makes you think. It makes you appreciate what's going on in your story.
Well, thank you. Thank
Mhm.
you. I'm glad that's been your experience of it.
So far.
So far. So far.
It is. It is. It's a good read. I won't say it's a quick read, but it's not like, oh, it's going to take me a month to get through this.
Mhm.
And it's practical because
That's the word, practical.
it's
Yeah.
practical because you were relating some of your grief, like your parents dying, right? And the relationship with your parents. I'm going, okay, I'm not the only one who had that kind of weird relationship with my parents.
Mhm.
I thought maybe it's me because everybody else is going on vacations with their parents and going shopping and having tea, and I can't get my mama to do nothing, but be my mama. She don't want to be my friend, you know. And
Yeah.
and as you talk about that and the grief and the resources, I know when my mama died, I went to her assisted living, and after and waited until the funeral director got there. And I wrote about this, that I'm sitting there, and of course, many times I've sat with parishioners and friends as they experience death and having been called after death, and I'm sitting there going like, "Where my priest?" I mean, I have priest friends, but that's not my priest, because lay people call their pastor, their minister, their priest. I could have called a priest friend, but and I'm sitting there going like, who's supposed to be sitting here with me?
Right.
It's very lonely. Well,
Mhm.
that's a whole other conversation about our accepting the vocational calling that we've accepted.
Right.
It's very lonely, and it's a sacred time when you are there with your loved one and they have just transitioned. but it's also a real exposed time.
Yeah.
Because I think it transcends even vulnerability. You feel exposed, just exposed, because you've never been in that situation before. You may have gone through grief with another person, but you've never been through grief with that person before. And that was the thing that got to me with respect to both my mother and my father dying, 4 months between each other. And the thing with my father in particularly was, I told Daddy that, and I shared about it in the book. I said, Daddy, life is hard at its best. And if you don't want to do this anymore, it's okay. He was in hospice. He was in hospice at the time. And he looked up at me and he said, really? I said, yeah, if you don't want to do this anymore, I said, I can't speak for my brother, but I can speak for me. If you don't want to do it anymore, so be it. Well, the next week, he was gone. The thing that got to me was, we had just gotten to a point in our relationship where I was really going to come out and share everything about me. Because, as I share in the book, as harsh as it might sound, I never thought that I had an opportunity or a chance for an authentic relationship with my parents until one of them died. Because they fed upon each other. Well, they've been married for 60 plus years. So they fed upon each other. And so they kind of followed, they were like two fish kind of swimming in concert. And so when my mother died, part of me was saying, okay, now I got a chance with Daddy. Now I got a chance with Daddy. I can do this with Daddy. I can do this with Daddy. And then Daddy died. And that was the thing that angered me. I'm like, okay, yeah, I know I told you could go, but couldn't you hang? I just need just a couple of days, just a couple of days. That's my father, though. Well, you said I could go, so Daddy acted upon what he said he was going to do. But that was a part of that was what I was experiencing as you share about, as you were sitting there in the chair thinking about, well, where's my priest? I'm sitting there thinking about, man, where's my daddy right now? I know I said he could go, but I need him to come back for just a minute here, just a minute here. And I still, truth be told, I still have my moments of just moments of discomfort.
Yeah.
Well, you gave him permission. You cannot take it back. Hello.
True.
You
And like
gave
I said,
him permission.
I know I did.
And once you have given him permission, you cannot take it back.
And one thing that my father was very big about, being an educator for X amount of years, was you must understand the words coming out of your mouth. And so I was like, I did.
Yeah.
So,
So,
you
go ahead.
talked about, in funeral homes, that should be a place where there are more priests there for people. I mean, at the moment, because basically when you go there, you're hit with the funeral director. So all they're doing is business, basically.
No, half of them are clergy too.
Oh, okay, they are.
You just don't know it until they start praying on you.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, yeah.
Praying being-
Gail, you laughing, but I'm telling you the truth.
But it does seem like, you gotta get the business done before I pray for it.
Are they
Hello,
praying or
hello.
praying?
Yeah, like
Hello.
P-R-E-Y.
Oh yeah, they're praying or praying.
Right.
Yeah.
I know I was dealing with my father's when he died, and I had a girlfriend who never had a close member of her family die. She said, Chandra, do you mind if I come with you? Because of course I had already gone through this with my husband several years before that. I said, sure. I said, not a problem. She said, I just want to see, what goes on, because she had never, gone through this. And I said, well, let me tell you what's going to happen. When we go in there, it's cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. First thing they're going to do is, do you want doves? Do you want butterflies to fly? Blah, blah, blah. So we were sitting there talking, and she couldn't even stay for 15 minutes. She said it was just too, not that the business part was going on, but I guess it became so overwhelming for her. She said, I cannot deal with this right now. So, like you said, it's a very vulnerable time and very lonely time. It's like, and if you haven't been through it, it's like, that's how they make so much money off these funerals. It's just a business.
Now.
Okay,
Don't
so
you
sorry.
make
Oh,
it
okay,
look
I'll
like
say
that.
some of them. Some of them. How about that?
Unless you
But
decide not to
you
have one.
just say that because they want to know, do you have insurance? And how much insurance do you have?
Right. As we process, and we're going to get to the seasons of grief and the grief reactions, but as you process this grief, particularly of parents dying, and we all handle that differently. Your mother wanted her body donated to science, and you did not. Now, my mother wanted her body to donated to science, but I forgot to sign the papers after her husband died, and so it was too late when she died. But I would have taken her up on donating her body to science. She did not want her funeral, and so we had a barbecue. We had a cookout because that's what she wanted. Some folks were like, "You're not going to have a church service," and my mama didn't want to have church service. We're going to have a party. That's what she wanted. And Chandra was at the party, and we gave
And it
out,
was great.
we gave out my mama's jewelry because she had so much. And my sister and I are going like, we either give it to Goodwill, or when people come, like, take what you want. So
And that was wonderful.
So we have to deal with it. But why didn't you want your mother's body donated to science?
It was just a very personal and sensitive thing for me. And I went through all of the gyrations of what are they going to do to my mother's body? How are they going to, her body's going to be used in an anatomy class? It was just a harsh image that I painted. Didn't have any factual stuff, but that I painted that I didn't want. Also, I got to share this. I think that one of the reasons that my mother said that was because she had attended a funeral of a dear friend of hers, a person that she grew up across the street from. And he had his body donated to science. And it was rather popular. I'll tell you that it was, you're familiar with Kirk Whalum, saxophone player? My mother grew up across the street from his father, Reverend Whalum. And so they were very, very close throughout the years. And so when he died, he wanted his body donated to science. And so it was the first time that my mother, I think, had ever attended a service, a memorial type of service with nobody present. I think that was really a first for her. And she liked that. She liked the fact that it wasn't as emotionally drawing or draining on her. And she didn't want Daddy, Arthur, and myself to go through that. So when I asked her, I said, why are you doing this? She said, I don't want you and your father and your brother to walk behind a casket and feel sad. Well, my response immediately was, well, you can't control that from the grave, but my mother has ways, and she ultimately did. So
they all do.
Okay. So that was the thing. It was, I accept, I know the fact that it's a noble thing to do. It's a good thing to do. It's advances. At the end of the day, I must admit, but that's my mama. No, no. But I did do it. Now, the other piece to it is the timing was all messed up. That my mother died in September of 2019. Well, she wasn't scheduled to be used in the anatomy class until the spring semester of 2020. Well, you know what happened in the spring of 2020? COVID kicked in. So the medical school closed down. And I guess, I don't know this, but I guess her body was placed in refrigeration or whatever until they could use it. Excuse me. So that did not happen. Daddy died in January of 2020. So I had his ashes, but I didn't have my mother's ashes at that time. So I said, but I still want to have some sort of a service, a memorial service, to get some sort of closure to this. I did not get my mother's ashes back until January 2021. And she had died in September of 2019. And so when I finally did get her ashes, I told my brother, I got mama's ashes. And so now we got mama's and daddy's. And so we met in Memphis at the columbarium, and I had already gotten the niche and the urns and all of that. And so I officiated that service. I knew I could, I spoke at the memorial service as well, but I knew that the inurnment service in our, BCP, it's 5 minutes, if that long. to do it. So I officiated that. And once the caretaker from the cemetery came and sealed the niche, that was when I had closure. I'm like, okay, I've done everything I can, and I'm pleased, and I can now keep moving in this space.
Thank you for that. I know that one of the things is that, and this is just a commercial for donation, anatomical donation. The military hospital up at Walter Reed, where they train the physicians for the military, accept donations. And some of you may have known Dr. Theodore Pinckney, who owned a funeral home, but his body was donated to the military. And once a year, they have all the families come and they have one service of thanks. And the doctors who actually used the bodies, they come to the families and thank the families personally, said, your mother, your father, your brother was my first patient. And we thank you for that, because they have helped me learn how to be the physician I am called to be, which puts a little different spin on it. Yeah. So the closure, the closure, yes. And we have to get over that, because we remember how we were in some of our anatomy classes in college, and we don't want that happening to our loved ones when we think about it. So thank you for explaining that. And the grief reactions, how people respond to grief. And you said that there's chronic, delayed, exaggerated, and disenfranchised. How do those reactions manifest themselves in reality?
Well, let's take one of them with respect to, let's take complicated grief as an example. One of the things that I was asked to do was to do some grief counseling, a grief group for the mesothelioma survivors, family members. And so as I gathered with my group, because there were several clergy people that were brought in, as I gathered with my group, I had about 6 or 7 people in the group. There was one woman that said, I just want you to know that I love my husband so much. I loved him so, so much. And every day I think about him and I cry every day. And I thought this had happened relatively new, fresh. Her husband died 5 years prior to that. And so there was obviously unfinished business that was there that she was really grappling with, or rather, I think she was grappling with, that was really impeding her from moving forward. Another situation happened. I remember when I worked at St. Elizabeth's Hospital, and for those of you all know St. E's in Washington, psychiatric hospital. I worked there, and they have the big communal rooms. And so when it comes to disenfranchised grief, there was a patient that was there that was really having a hard time from the very beginning. And so when I would go there to make my rounds and visit various patients on the ward, on the unit, then the nurse at one point said, Chaplain Phillips, can you come here for a minute? You need to talk to so-and-so, because they've been really out of control today and haven't been obedient, haven't just been really out of control. You got to talk to him. And so I said, all right, fine. So I went over to him, and I was just the two of us sitting over on the side. And he told me that I'm really going through something, but you can't tell anybody about it. I said, all right, well, I won't tell anybody. What is it? He said, well, I recently got a phone call like last night that my boyfriend has left me and has cleaned out the house, and I have nothing. I don't have anything left, and I don't have him. And I can't talk about that here in this unit, because if they find out that I'm gay, they will do all kind of things to me. Disenfranchised because of the values that people are placing upon your situation, the particularities of your case. So it plays itself out in so many different ways. Anticipatory grief, for those that have experienced, I have friends who have parents who have been diagnosed with dementia and ultimately Alzheimer's, and slow progression, years and years. The loss occurred years ago, but the physical body is still here. And trying to reconcile that is so very, very difficult. And so I have a friend of mine right now who's dealing with that, and he's not handling it well, because when he walked into his mother's bedroom the first time and she did not know who he was done. And there's so many stories like that. I'm sure all of us on the screen could probably attest to a story like that. So those are just some of the examples, the ways that this thing plays itself out.
And then you get into the ideology of relationships, and you talk about self-esteem. So how do we maintain self-esteem? And I'm going to use the Episcopal Church and the issues that it's going through in terms of racism, white supremacy. How do we maintain self-esteem when the church continues to engage in anti-Black racism and white supremacy, which in effect tells Black folks that the church does not want us, but merely tolerates us?
Oh.
Speechless.
Well, I mean, I think that's probably the $50 million question for all of us here on the screen. How do we navigate through that? How do we create and maintain self-esteem? And here's the thing about it. It's not only self-esteem is not just going to be the case within one aspect of your life.
Right.
That's probably pouring over into other aspects of your life as well. And we could go back to childhood as far as the ways in which we experience brokenness early on. And so again, going back and acknowledging what happened then, and doing things that can put you on that trajectory towards healing, despite the environment in which you find yourself. And I know that's a hard call. That's a real hard call. Sometimes we have to just push through. We have to push through and finding the resources that we can, and deepening. I'm always going to lean back into our relationship with God. How can we deepen our relationship with God? How can we become so vulnerable? How can we stand naked in front of God so that God can continue to work with us and groom us in the ways that we need to be groomed to be the person that God created us to be? And that's a hard call. It's a very hard call. And so I don't have any canned answer with respect to the way in which the Episcopal Church is handling that, because I think that we individually have to work on that. It's not only a race piece, that is a piece of it. It's also an individual piece that we have to work on as well.
Thank you. You also talk about personal introspection and transformation. How are they related? Are they related? How are they related to each other?
I think that in doing personal introspection, it enables you to experience personal transformation. One of the things that happens, I know, as I talk to clients in my side practice, they'll say, Dr. Rose, I met this guy. If they're in a dating situation, I met this guy and he's really, really nice, but he's pulling some stuff that is really too, all familiar to me. And, I used to take that kind of stuff, but I just can't do that anymore. I can't do that anymore. And they raise this as a point of frustration, almost expressing, I kind of wish I could, I kind of wish I could deal with it some more. And my response to them is, you can't deal with it anymore because you have experienced a transformation. You've done introspective work with me. And when you are away from me, you've done the introspective work and you have now transformed into a space where you can never go back to the way you were before. Transformation is different from change. When you talk about change, I believe you can flip-flop back and forth. You can change back and forth. Transformation, no. If you're truly transformed, you're there. And you're not going to go back in a place, which is why Walter Brueggemann, as I speak about in the book, those 3 seasons of life, orientation, disorientation, and new orientation. He's very intentional to not say reorientation, because you can never go back to the way that you were if you have truly done introspective work and experienced a transformative space.
Good. They provide some great insight. As you go through your chapters, you provide, in addition to the lament psalms and the practice in writing lament psalms, you also provide information on grief narratives, how people you have counseled have walked with and through grief. And you also use an imago dialogue. Why are those things important to this whole journey?
I started out by saying that we need to have a safe space to express our feelings and emotions, a safe space. I use imago a great deal because imago is a technique, a communication technique that has built in it safety. In fact, most structured approaches have safety built in it, because you stay within the process and you can move from one space to the next, as opposed to going willy-nilly, et cetera, et cetera. So imago, I like using imago a great deal because it enables people to listen with both their ears, their head, and their heart, both this and that. And that is a very powerful way of enabling people to connect. I use it with couples, but not only with couples, I've used it with family members who are going through conflict. Because when you experience conflict, there are 2 things that are trying to occur, but they can't because nobody feels safe: healing and growth. Healing and growth. And so with imago, with its structured approach, it lays out a way for you to actually say what's express what's in your heart to your partner, so that the partner can get it. So many times I've had, in working with couples, that one of the partners will say, I've always known that data about you. I've always known the things that you've talked about tonight. But for whatever reason, tonight, it registered with me in a different way. I kind of get it now. But I've always known A, B, C, D, E, F, G, always known that. But tonight, for whatever reason, I'm getting it differently. So there's safety built in those structured approaches. And imago is the approach that I've used a great deal, that I think has been very effective in the community.
And I've seen it work. You've used it in training on me. It works.
Most of the people on this screen, I think,
there you go. have seen it or been participated in it. Yeah. So, as you get to chapter 7, which is a disquieted peace, you say, in the midst of the storms of life, we yearn to be in an emotional space that is free from stress, anxiety, and fear that typically accompany such tumultuous times. For many of us, that emotional space was the church. And as we see with everything going on with the church writ large, how do we kind of make that space, find that space, recreate that space, reorient that space to be what we thought it should be or what we think it should be? Where do we find that peace that surpasses all understanding?
I think it first begins with you. That peace that surpasses all understanding begins with you and your experience of your relationship with God. And there are some times that it is beneficial for such a time as that to step away from the traditional institution of the church and experience the deepening of a relationship with God. And I'm very intentional to say, for such a time as that. I'm not saying that you should leave the church and never come back. No, but there are times that because of the hurt that we have experienced in the church, because of the woundedness, the brokenness that we've experienced in the church, we need to find a space for grace where we can heal. Now, should that be in the church? That would be lovely. And in some situations, maybe you can find it there in the church, but that's not always the case. And so I've told people that have been very parishioners who have been very disgruntled with their parish life, with the life, that maybe it's time for you to just, I don't use the term take a break, but try something a little bit different for a little while. You know, go to a trough from which you can drink that spiritual water that will refresh you. It will refresh you. And then see what the Holy Spirit says. Holy Spirit might say, go back to this particular place, might say, go to that place. Don't know. Don't know. So it's a hard call. It's a hard call, but I think it's the type of thing that, once again, we have to step out of kindergarten theology and move into those spaces of grace that are wrapped in a spiritual maturity that is based upon the depth of relationship that we have with God.
So as we get ready to close, any questions from anybody before we give Dr. Phillips his final words, sending us out from beauty, sending us out from brokenness to beauty and stopping along the way with some healing?
Practical question. Who published the book, Robert?
The book was self-published.
Oh, okay.
You can find it on Amazon.com.
Okay.
It's available online, Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, and also at Target.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And somebody named iPhone has their hand up.
Hi, this is Paula.
Hi, Paula.
Paula, as in Paula Clark.
No, as in Paula Smith from Trinity.
Paula Smith from Trinity. Okay.
Yes.
Wonderful.
I just wanted to say, the last part you were talking about, giving yourself some grace when you're having problems, or there are situations at your church that are not appeasing to you at the time and you're not getting the spiritual food. I'm glad you said that, because I myself decided to take some grace and to separate myself for a while, to give myself some time to think about and to, like you say, visit other churches to see if I get spiritual food in other ways and other means and stuff, and to kind of give myself a chance to heal. So I'm glad that I didn't feel like I just kind of stepped out on a limb by myself, that other people also see that. So that's very comforting. And also early on when you were speaking about death, and there's different types of death, and the place that the church plays in that. My son, when my mother passed away, one of my sons, my oldest son, took it very hard. And not only did he lose his grandmother, who he adored, but also shortly after that, a relationship he had been in for many years and stuff, someone he thought he would be making his future life with, also crumbled. And then on top of that, he also lost his job, and mainly because of the fact that he was dealing with so much grief and depression at the time, and people not working with him at his job, seeing him going through this, and also he wound up losing his job. So he had been struggling with that, and he had been underneath psychiatric help, and then also we've been trying to find some type of spiritual guidance and stuff and help for him as far as dealing with grief. We knew a lot of that was coming from the grief of things, of these different types of deaths that he had experienced, and just had a hard time. And still at this time, this has been like almost 5 years now, still having quite some difficulty finding help within the church and him dealing with his grief.
Yeah. It's
So
very
it's very hard, and it's very hard for a parent to see your child going through this. And I say the word broken. I know he's not broken because he's a child of God, but broken in that his spirit seems to be somewhat broken, and his because of his loss. And also I just don't know where to go with that or who to reach out to. We've reached out to multiple ministers who have put us in touch with people. And then some of them, of course, the first question is, well, what kind of insurance you have? And which is kind of be a turnoff, because you're looking for that spiritual comfort and help. And I don't think that should be the first thing out your mouth if that's what you're supposed to be there to help somebody in their healing process. But anyway.
If I could jump in, if you don't mind, if you would send your contact information to Gail.
I'll put you two together.
And connect us, and I will share some other places where you might be able to find some further support.
I would love that. Thank you.
Okay.
Also, I think as you're thinking about the support services that she could have, this is a person who's experienced multiple traumas.
Yeah.
And so we have to look at it through a trauma lens. And oftentimes when you're looking at this from a spiritual lens, you are leaving out trauma.
Yeah.
And I think that the person who has experience in dealing with grief, work, as well as trauma would be very important in looking at that. Because he's based upon what she just said, is that there are multiple traumas, multiple deaths. And we know that they build upon each other, and it becomes more and more difficult to pull themselves out of that process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yes.
So it might not just be one person.
Right. Yes.
That they need to receive assistance from.
Right.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah, as I understand. Yes, I agree totally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Thank you, Paula.
This is Kama. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, Sheila, how are you?
I am well.
Good.
I am enjoying motherhood, but I just wanted to say that, I haven't been able. I know, dear. I just wanted to say something really quickly to Reverend Rob. I just wanted to thank you all for the conversation, and just to, as you talk about grief within motherhood, there's so many, in parenthood, there's so many grieving. Ooh, hey, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. All right. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I don't know if I got my point. I think I lost my point, but just with motherhood, there's so many, and parenthood, there's so many spaces in this journey that have, even with our blessing, that we have grieved. So just reminding people that, even though the end result has been a blessed result, there are definitely steps along the journey that were definitely difficult to talk about, and difficult for people to, you don't want to share everything with everybody, but it was definitely hard there were definitely hard times that, we were grieving through with those different life steps. So just wanted to thank you for the conversation, and to raise that up a little bit as well, since I don't know, Black maternal health is always so important. So.
Oh yes, it is. It is. Thank you.
And I think what she was talking about, goes back to what you said, Robert, that safe place.
Yeah.
Safe to even talk about things, because I've been to a couple of your workshops, and we didn't know a lot of the people,
Right.
but the space was such that you felt like you could open up, So, and of course, with you leading us and guiding us, it made it even felt safer. So I just wanted to relate to that, let you know about that.
Thank you. Thank you. So any last words, Reverend Doctor, as we go from brokenness to beauty?
Well, I would like to lift up, as I close out in the book, the 23rd Psalm, but I want to lift it up from the Message Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do that in closing.
Yes, you please do.
As I've talked about walking through the valley of the shadow of death, but I want you to hear the way that the Message Bible brings it up. God, my shepherd, I don't need a thing. You have bedded me down in lush meadows. You find me quiet pools to drink from. True to your word, you let me catch my breath and send me in the right direction. Even when the way goes through Death Valley, I'm not afraid when you walk at my side. Your trusty shepherd's crook makes me feel secure. You serve me a 6-course dinner right in front of my enemies. You revive my drooping head. My cup brims with blessing. Your beauty and love chase after me every day of my life. I'm back home in the house of God for the rest of my life.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Man, that's beautiful.
Amen. Isn't it? Isn't it? So that's the 23rd Psalm from the Message Bible. If you don't have to run out and buy it, you can go to Bible Gateway, and they have like 50 different versions of the Bible, and you just put in the scriptural passage and tell it which Bible you want it out of, and it comes up on the screen. So, so they are all there. Again, I want to thank you for being here. Robert, thank you for writing the book. Remember, it's A Space for Grace, Pathways from Brokenness to Beauty, from your favorite place, Amazon.com, or you can actually go to a bookstore and they will order it for you. But if you want it tomorrow or the next day, but it's very practical.
Or Barnes and Noble too.
Barnes and Noble.
And Target.
Target. And I'm sure if you went to Loyalty Books, since you Black, they would get it for you, but it's a very, very easy to read, a very practical book that if you're not making notes while you're reading, then something's wrong, because there's plenty to make notes and underline and say, "Ooh, that's me. I didn't know. He also went through that. I can understand that." So a very, very good handbook. It is a handbook. It is a manual. Yes. It's a manual of how to get from brokenness. And we're all broken, but we don't want to like dwell in it. We want to get to the beauty, and this book will take you through those steps. So again, thank you very, very much, the Reverend Doctor, and thank everyone who attended and all those who will see this at a later date. Have a very blessed rest of the evening and a blessed week. And don't forget that on Sunday, May 7th at 4 p.m. at Trinity, the Crummell Cooper chapter will be having its Absalom Jones celebration. If you are clergy, we ask you to vest. It starts at 4 p.m. We have a very dynamic 32-year-old preacher from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Pastor Claudia Marion Allen, and she can preach the roof off. So do not miss an opportunity to come and be with UBE and to hear a fantastic preacher and to be lifted spiritually. So again, thank you, each and every one of you. Blessings. And just remember, this will be on YouTube. So if you want to go back and review it again, it'll be there for as long as you need it. So with that, have a very good evening, everyone. Thank you much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Good night.
Thank you,
Thank
Gail.
you.
God bless
Thank
you.
you.
God bless
Thank you.
everybody.
Let's see.
Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.